on my computer. And if there's any issues where people do not want anything to be circulated after this, you're welcome to just let me know and we'll do that, all right? But just, we had a great session on Monday on online bid committees, and the Zoom cloud recording didn't work. It recorded one individual sitting at his computer the whole session, and there was no voice or no sound or anything, and I was just so I need to take some control back on that one. So just welcome to you all. Good morning. Just quick couple of points that I suggested we just cover is just initially any feedback on the discussion that we had yesterday around the contracts issue that was raised. And then I've just got a couple of points on the draft procurement bill, and I've had this on the agenda for a couple of sessions. But maybe just kick off with any feedback on the contracts issue that was raised yesterday. For those that didn't join us, what one of the folks said, I'm not sure if she's online yet, is just, hey, she's got a cleaning contract, and you know, the folk could not come in, the service provider could not come in and continue with the contract, and now they are getting invoices for the full month. Do they pay those? What do they do? What do they do for the current month? Where are we going on this? And one of the things that we raised as well, you know, is this potentially a force majeure event? And a couple of things like that. And so what I did do this morning is I sent to everyone a whole bunch of court cases that came through. And I think one or two folk might have actually had a chance to look at that. I did get some feedback from some. But Helen, we can see you there, and you're looking nice and fresh in the Western Cape there this morning. And did you get a chance to just think through this a little bit? I'm just going to unmute you quickly. There we are. We can hear you.
So it's on the force majeure there.
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually still busy with the research. It's a bit complicated, but I think all of us should first understand the principle of force majeure. It's an act that no one could have foreseen, and the intention is to put the parties in a position where they would have been without the contract, understanding that when the event passes, you have to continue with the contract. So it's not just a contract termination. That doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen that you can terminate the contract. The main issue is you need to understand what's in your contract. So first of all, whatever type of contract you have, you will have to go and see what is the general conditions of contract or your specific contract says about force majeure and how the parties will react. Normally there's a process, there's days where you communicate, and then there's an agreement to be reached. And I think the most important thing that we need to understand with force majeure is there must be communication. So any form of negotiation, even if it's electronically or by mail, obviously we cannot, and I understand that, we will not remunerate from government side someone for work they haven't done. But if people have been employed for a contract, it's going to be very difficult to just stand back and say, well, it's not my risk anymore, unless they can be compensated somewhere else. So that's one of the elements when you do your research on force majeure is how you use it. Secondly, force majeure only apply to certain commodities and certain contracts. For instance, it's very clear that on rental agreements, you cannot stand back or terminate a contract on force majeure. So that is something we need to understand. And then lastly is at the passing of the event, the contract must still continue or be able to be continued, unless it's something completely impossible. But that's how far I got. I haven't had a chance to look at all the court cases. But what is good for you guys is even myself, when I Googled force majeure, there's extensive articles, especially in the UK and USA, on how to deal with it and some good checklists and guidance. So I would encourage you to maybe just do a little bit of a research yourself and decide. But most importantly, look at your contract first to see what your contract says.
Fascinating. Thank you, Helen. I did ask one or two other folk just to scan one of those or scan a couple of the court cases. I got some feedback from Brian, who looked in particular at the Transnet case, and he said, I'll just read that to you. I don't see Brian online here, so I'll just quickly give that to you. He said, one of the points that came up in that case was that both parties must take all possible actions to resolve the issue, which I think is your point that you raised. There's got to be communication on that, between communication and negotiations between the two parties. But what he said was quite interesting was if there isn't that negotiation, then it might invalidate the force majeure. And so that's very important. So anyone who is you're thinking of that, or that might be, you certainly now need to start engaging with that service provider. Don't just wait for them to send you some correspondence. There needs to be some activity that happens between them. So that was the one. Just wanted to check if Henry is online, if he had a chance to look at the one case. Henry, if not, I did get some feedback from Inber just a short while ago. I can share that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Henry.
Hi. Sorry, just briefly, obviously, I'm sure Inber would have a much better kind of explanation, but I had a brief look at that Sunrail case.
The Sunrail one, yes.
I think the Sunrail versus Aveng and a joint venture. I think the main thing that the judge at the end of the day said was that, you know, he didn't have to prove force majeure, but he actually looked at three important aspects that he considered. Firstly, it's whether the parties, or in this particular case, the applicant, whether they could have taken reasonable steps to avoid or overcome the condition or the situation. So that was the first thing. Secondly, whether Sunrail in this case, you know, whether, you know, how they could have kind of contributed to this. And then lastly, whether the alleged force majeure affected the substantial part of the work, you know, coming back to what Helen was also saying earlier in terms of, you know, only subset. So I think in this particular case, one of the things that the judge then said is that the Aveng JV didn't really, okay, sorry, for some of the people that haven't read it, it was basically the situation was that there was a disruption at the site. You know, some of these construction work, sometimes you get the community wants to actually participate in the work, and they basically blocked work from happening because of, they then blocked the work from happening because they wanted to be involved. And so eventually then Aveng then said, look, we can't continue working, and they wanted to declare force majeure. So in this particular case, the judge said you could have made reasonable steps to try and work with them. Sunrail also indicated to you that you had to try and resolve the issue with the community. You haven't, and basically you can't use that as a basis in that particular case.
Thanks, Henry. I think that's a common theme that's coming throughout, is taking action and doing something about it, and probably having some evidence that you've done that. Terry, did you have a chance to look at that other one? I think that was the municipal one, Terry. I'm not sure if you had a chance to scan it. I don't want to put, please don't try and say anything if you didn't have a chance to read it. All right, fine. Anyone else have any other thoughts on, there, Terry, your mic is unmuted now.
Hello.
Yeah, hi Terry, we can hear you now.
Hi, so it's Dumisani here.
Hi Dumi, yes, hi.
Hi, so I'm joining the meeting for the first time. I'm from Sun Parks. I'm catching the discussion halfway, but it's quite an interesting discussion. I've got a question on the force majeure, because we've got concessions and
Yes.
concession and the triple P agreement. And obviously, because we're in the tourism industry.
You said you're Sand Parks, Dumisani?
Yes, Sun Parks,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes. So they are affected like we are. And obviously, we need to think of some kind of relief. How we structured our triple Ps, that they pay a minimum rental, but which is also linked to a percentage. If they've made more turnover, then they will normally top up that minimum rental to a percentage of a turnover that they've used. But obviously, with no tourism activity, they're not making money. Now, the question that I have is, we're tossing two things: whether we waive revenue, or we suspend revenue for a period of time so that we allow these guys to recover from this situation. But where we got stuck is the first merger, because most of our contracts was first merger clause. And there's a debate whether first merger, is it in a form of a relief? Is it meaning waiving the revenue at all, or suspending for a period of time until the person is able to be able to pay whatever he can, because it's now generated revenue? Has anyone looked at that particular angle of the first merger?
So Dumisani, just to confirm, the triple Ps, are those under Treasury Regulation 16, or
Yes.
are they just, so they are formal triple Ps, Treasury Regulation 16,
They're formal triple P.
not 16A. My experience of triple Ps is the force majeure discussion in the contract is a major discussion point always. And that should be quite detailed in each of those triple P contracts. And I'm not sure you could look at or make any general comment across them all, because each one would be negotiated separately with legal teams on both sides. Any other thoughts from anyone else? Helen, I saw you listening intently there, and not easy to comment on triple Ps in particular.
Yes,
Yeah, they're quite cool.
Yeah, I know the contracts are very complex. So I agree with Sean that to give you a proper answer, sir, you most probably, or we most probably will have to see what's the conditions in the contract. And that will normally guide you about the parameters of your discretion. If it could be a waiving, if it could be a suspension, if it could be a combination of both. It could even be a lower rate. I'm not sure. You will have to see what your contract arrangements are. And it will not be the normal general conditions of contract. I think it's fairly detailed in the contract.
Each one's very different, yeah. One of the things that came up to Dumisani yesterday was that this is certainly an area where you need to be engaging your legal team. This is not something that an SCN person needs to be taking a guess on and trying certain things. So I don't know if you've had a chance to engage your legal team on this.
No, I have. I was speaking to head of legal this morning, so we're getting a legal opinion on it. What I was trying to establish, maybe from this team, if you've got had a look at it, maybe there's a different way from the way we're looking at it. But we're definitely going to be getting a legal opinion.
Good one. I had some feedback from Sanrail this morning. They've got some massive projects that are being looked at the moment, and they're exploring the force majeure issue under the circumstances. And they're having that discussion this morning. So I think there's going to be a lot of things that come through, particularly now that we've hit month end and we're starting with a new month. And everybody's thinking about invoices and all that kind of stuff. I think there's going to be lots of things that will come through shortly.
And it's year end.
And it's year end for PFMAs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You did get the notice on the the date changes, reporting changes.
Yes, I actually wrote to Treasury last week requesting for that extension.
Good, well done, Dumisani.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
All right, Abigail, I thought you unmuted your mic for a short while there.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to confirm that because we're also working on a triple P on the Gautrain,
That's
that
right.
yeah, the clause is very extensive, and the negotiations are going on right now with our legal counsels, and what is really coming in really on our side is that there's an issue of the coronavirus, and then there's the issue of the government who then put the lockdown. So there are those issues, the two issues that are being debated. So it will be interesting to see what the outcome is.
Sorry, I mean, if you don't mind, will you please maybe offline we can share note, because we seem to have a common interest.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'll be able to share, if you agree, I'll share your emails there. So Abigail is with Dumisani. Abigail is with the Gautrain Management Agency. That
Okay, please do. Thank you.
Gautrain contract.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I see Anda has joined us, and hope she had the chance to get some of this discussion. But if not, Anda, we've recorded this, and we'll make this available if you missed some of the early part. Anything else to talk through, and let's move on then. All right, let's go. Just a couple of points on the draft procurement bill, and this we put on the agenda. I think a couple of people have said this particular emergency is giving us a wonderful opportunity to just say, hey, how will this bill actually work going forward? If this bill was in place, if this act was enacted, then how would things be different? And a couple of people have said, well, it's not that friendly towards e-procurement type situations and other. But just thought to quickly run through what the bill says on emergency procurement, and I'll run through this quickly, and then if there's any comments on this, then we can have a quick discussion. So the bill does have a definition of what constitutes an emergency. It means a natural disaster, epidemic, riot, war, fire, or any other situation that results in a threat to life or health, welfare, or safety of the public, which requires immediate action. So there's a definition. It's there. So from a definition perspective, tick that. There's probably a couple of little things that we could do to enhance that. There is an interesting statement in the procurement planning section, which just says to avoid emergency procurement wherever possible. That's nice. Thank you, National Treasury. And then there's a section in here, and for those who have not gone through this bill, and any other perspectives, Helen, you might have some perspectives around this as well. What this does is basically empower the regulator, who will put out regulations, because this is an act. This will be an act. And what Regulation 121 says is that it just describes the scope of what the minister would agree on in terms of the emergency regulations. What are the different types of emergency procurement that may be used, and the circumstances under which the different types may be used? An outline of the planning efforts of the institution to limit the need for emergency procurement and to improve responsiveness during an emergency. The prerequisites for awarding and administering contracts during emergencies. Options available to the institutions during an emergency and the preferred method of procurement. And then the procedures to be followed in respect of emergency procurement processes, including the recording of the deliberations, the making recommendations and award, and any procedural or administrative matters that are necessary to implement the provisions of this Act. So, as is most of us, when we do look at this, we say, okay, interesting. We're looking forward to the detail. And that's really all the procurement bill says at this point in time on emergency procurement. Any initial thoughts from anyone on this? Any thoughts on the definition? Brian, good morning. Quick one, Brian.
Sean, I think we must be very careful here. The bill prescribes procedures. It allows the interpretation to fit the circumstances of a disaster like we're currently having. Right? It's not prescribing what you do. It's giving you the options to make the choices that you need to run your business in these circumstances. And I think we need to bear that in mind with the bill. And this one, Regulation 121, I think sums up that view very carefully. We have a decentralized procurement. The people who know what the best situation is for the organizations are the organizations themselves. Government's not prescribing. Government's saying we must act as responsible public servants.
So I beg to differ there, Brian. This is actually saying no. The regulator will tell you what procurement types you should use, the planning, how you would award and administer, the preferred methods of procurement, the procedures to be followed in respect of emergency procurement processes. This is fairly strong in terms of how the level at which it will regulate, far more than what we've got now.
Sean, if you look at, I take the Western Cape Provincial, if you ever look at their emergency procurement procedure policy, which is like about 70 pages, all right, and it's got so many procedures, none of which actually functions. But Regulation 121 says the minister may make regulations, may.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Emergency procurement, which may include. And I think it's that element that it's saying that if you as a decentralized organization are incapable of making the correct decisions for your business unit, he will make that on your behalf. We are not a centralized procurement system. And I don't think the minister or the regulator has actually got the physical time to analyze every single organ of state and work out what the requirements are. They do not have that time, and they do not have the knowledge of the organization. So the key words here is the minister may make regulations, emergency procurement, which may include. What I will predict will happen is that they will wait to see what we do. And when we fail to act as responsible individuals, we are going to get instructions coming through, which is not what we want. So it's how we behave that's going to enact this clause. And I may be cynical, all right, but you're quite right in the sense that the minister will end up prescribing regulations because we have failed in our responsibilities. It's happened in the past so many times.
Sure.
All right. So what I'm suggesting to people is we need to look at this as a practical method of dealing with the situations. We are a decentralized environment. And let's show our responsibility and let the minister manage his affairs and not our affairs. We need to show that responsibility.
Thanks, Brian.
And ability.
Nice input there. Thank you, Brian. Any other thoughts? Let's see. Mark, I was going to ask you to make a comment.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I must be honest in that I haven't gone through the detail of the bill yet. I do think there's a bit of a maybe conflict between the principles of the PFMA that were originally striving to decentralize responsibility, make managers more responsible, etc. And what I see in the bill giving a lot of powers centrally and to the minister and to the regulator, etc. Not that I'm opposed to some of that, but it does look like instead of allowing institutions to manage and be responsible and accountable, it looks like we're going to have, after the bill, we're going to have more regulation. And it kind of goes against what the whole aim of this new bill was in terms of simplifying the procurement landscape and maybe giving more responsibility and authority to individual organizations and people, officials. So I don't know, that's just my general concern at the moment. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I'm struggling with is that, like this element here that deals with emergency procurement, it's kind of subject to further, let's say, regulations that would be issued, and we don't know what they are. So the bill sort of implies a lot of powers and responsibility to the OCPO and other bodies, but it doesn't yet just define how that's going to be translated into supporting regulations. So there's a lot of, for me, there's a lot of unknowns about what the next step would be, because after the bill, there would be extensive regulations to support the implementation of the bill, and we haven't seen those. No.
Fascinating, Mark. Yeah. Any other thoughts, Helen? We've got to ask you. We can all see you, so we have to ask you also for some comment.
Well, then I'll take my screen off. Now, well, I'm definitely in support of Mark that the bill has a very strong focus on centralization, which is completely opposite to what the PFMA and the MFMA wants to achieve, and that's why I said I don't want to go into a legal technical debate, but there's definitely a lot of constitutional concerns. There's a lot of common law principles on admin law that will be questioned. And then especially now, if we look at these regulations, and as the one gentleman was mentioning, is it goes into the level of making procedural and administrative arrangements, which is contrary to what the Constitution allows our different spheres of government to be and to have. And so it does go to the level of the how, and it's supposed to only stop at the level of the what. Because the how should always be an organization's own responsibility. But then again, we're speculating because we don't know what the regulations will look like. For me, I think there's still going to be a lot of debate on this bill, and it will drill down on a lot of really pertinent legal and administrative issues that this is just an example of. So I'm not sure if this is the forum to discuss it, sure. But reading through it, I mean, you can see there's been thought, you can see that there's a structure, which I'm not necessarily against. It just depends on what level of detail they go into. And then secondly, for instance, on issuing regulations, there's a completely different provision for MFMA than for PFMA on the issuing of instructions and regulations. And if you go to the back of the bill, which indicates what will be changed in law, that's not being referenced either. So the whole legality of this will still have to be sorted out. My few cents.
Brilliant. Thank you, Helen. Brian, did you want to make another comment?
What Mark said and what Helen said is very true. I was in a meeting with public entities and the acting CPO.
The previous
And what, yes, what shocked me incredibly, all right, which reflects back to what Mark and Helen are saying, was this, the previous acting CPO said he spends most of his time answering decentralized procurement questions, which is not the responsibility of the regulator. And he actually stated to about 6 people that it's decentralized, you need to make the decisions. And the people kept hammering him on that he must make the decisions, not them. So the CPO's office supports what Mark and Helen are saying. But people, the public entities, and these were SOEs, 3As and 3Bs and 2s, were demanding that the CPO, the new regulator, must make their decisions. And it is a point that's coming through here. This, as I said, this historical way that we have been dealing with procurement between National Treasury, the CPO, and the organizations, the CPO is not happy with the fact that he has to make decisions.
Mm.
This bill is reflecting the fact that they're reacting to the way that the public entities keeps asking them to make the decisions. It's not the right way. They have the authority to advise the accounting authority, the accounting officers. They do not have delegated authority to advise people within the public entities. So in a funny way, the previous acting CPO is in complete agreement to what Mark and Helen have said.
Mm.
And this bill seems to reflect this conundrum that seems to exist in our system. And I don't know how we're going to resolve it, because it's not purely a legal matter, it's purely a principle of common sense at the practical level. But I was horrified, and I will restate that I was horrified.
Thanks, Brian.
I mean, he said so many times, and they just ignored him. They said he must make decisions. It was scary.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. All right, for anyone else? I saw one or two other mics unmuted. No. All right, folk. There's everyone's got lots of work to do between now and tomorrow to pull together the consolidated demand requirements for the next 6 months on PPE that's needed and other requirements that are needed for the state of disaster, and to get that through to National Treasury tomorrow. So don't forget to do that and focus on that. I do not have anything specific for the discussion tomorrow. So anyone who's got anything that they would like to put forward and table, welcome to send myself and Henry an email and just outline that, and let's table that tomorrow. But any other thoughts or any other topics you'd like to talk through, we'll certainly try and do some prep and put that on the agenda tomorrow. All right, we just passed at 10:30. Said we'll try and keep this to half an hour. Anything else from anyone else? You quickly unmute your mic.
Thank you.
Thanks, folk. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Helen and the team.
Thank you.
It's great to connect. Yeah, I'm enjoying this.
Thank you. Thanks, Abigail. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day and stay at home. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and Dumi. Glad you joined us,
Thank
Dumisani.
Thank you so much.
Welcome again.